Have you ever wondered? Could there have been a man in all of human history so fabulously wealthy, so astronomically rich, that he'd make Bill Gates or Elon Musk look like they'd forgotten their wallets at home? A man whose journey didn't just change the fortunes of a kingdom, but shifted the very course of the world? Well, get comfortable. Let's turn back the sands of time, all the way to the 14th century. Because tonight we're going to uncover the strangely soothing and gently spectacular story of Mansa Musa, the richest man who ever lived. Yes, ever. And by the end of this tale, you just might drift off peacefully, dreaming of golden caravans and silent desert nights. Our story tonight is titled, The Entire Life of Mansa Musa, Richest Man on Earth. Told in a slow, sleepy tone with just a touch of gentle humor, this isn't your average history lesson. It's bedtime for grown-ups. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Dawn of the Mali Empire and the Birth of a Legend. In this first chapter we set the scene. What was Mali like before Mansa Musa? Who were his ancestors? And how did a young boy, born far from the throne, begin the quiet journey toward legendary greatness? Chapter 2. A Crown, a Kingdom, and the First Reforms. Here we follow Musa's unexpected rise to power. Spoiler alert, it involves a lot of sand, diplomacy, and perhaps an accidental royal promotion. We'll also explore the early reforms that laid the golden bricks for a golden age. Chapter 3. The Mecca Pilgrimage, a world-rattling event. This chapter is all about the trip. The Hajj to Mecca. Gold, camels, thousands of followers, and an economy or two shaken in his wake. Egypt will never forget him. Neither will the price of bread. Chapter 4. Gold, Glory, and the Peak of Power. Let's talk riches. How did Mansa Musa use Mali's enormous gold reserves? How did he turn his wealth into monuments, mosques, and the glorious rise of Timbuktu? And was it too much gold? Hint, maybe. Chapter 5. Architecture and Knowledge, a Legacy in Stone and Scroll. In this chapter we slow things down to admire the libraries, the mosques, the scholars, how Musa made knowledge fashionable, centuries before Google. Chapter 6. Diplomacy and Global Reach. Mansa Musa didn't stop at Mali's borders. We'll explore how his influence stretched beyond Africa, and how kings and sultans took notice. A golden empire, with golden connections. Chapter 7. The Final Years and a Fading Light. Every story has an ending. In this chapter we reflect on the last years of Mansa Musa's life, and the slow, quiet decline of the empire after his reign. Still majestic. Still gold-tinged. But not quite as dazzling. Chapter 8. The Legacy of Mansa Musa and his Echo Through Time. And finally we ask, what remains of Mansa Musa today? How is he remembered? And what can we learn from a man whose generosity was as legendary as his wealth? So tuck yourself in. The deserts of Mali await. And Mansa Musa, gold-laden and gloriously larger than life, is ready to tell you his story. One slow, dreamy chapter at a time. Let's not keep you waiting any longer. We'll begin right away with Chapter 1. The Dawn of the Mali Empire and the Birth of a Legend. Mali, a rising power in West Africa. Picture this. Before we even mention Mansa Musa, a name many of us may have never heard before, yet a man who would become the richest human in all of history, we need to turn back the clock. Back to the 13th century, and the early 14th. To a corner of the world we now call West Africa, where a mighty empire was beginning to stir. Its name? The Mali Empire. Now I know that might sound a bit, well, boring. But trust me, this kind of boring is the foundation of something truly extraordinary. At that moment in time, while Europe was busy stumbling through crusades and endless feudal squabbles, something dazzling was quietly taking shape in West Africa. And no, this wasn't just some tiny kingdom. This was a vast empire, stretching across lands we now know as Mali, Mauritania, Senegal, the Gambia, Guinea, and even parts of Niger and Côte d'Ivoire. To give you a sense of scale, that's larger than all of Western Europe combined. Yes, really? So what gave this empire its power? It wasn't superior technology or fearsome legions like ancient Rome. Mali's strength came from something the whole world has always craved. Gold. Yes, gold. The enormous gold mines of Bure and Wangara, hidden deep within Mali's soil, turned this empire into the largest gold supplier on Earth at the time. Just imagine. In a world where gold defined power, Mali held the keys to prosperity itself. But it wasn't just about the gold. Mali also stood at the crossroads of the great trans-Saharan trade routes. Massive caravans loaded with gold, salt, ivory and slaves made their way through bustling cities like Timbuktu, Jen and Gao. Salt, yes, good old-fashioned salt, was as precious as gold back then. It came from mines like Tagaza and played a huge role in the empire's economy. The combination of rich natural resources and a thriving trade network made Mali not only wealthy but powerful. And this was the world into which our Mansa Musa would soon emerge. A land full of promise, brimming with potential, just waiting for a brilliant leader to lift it to dazzling new heights. That was the foundation of the Keita dynasty and the lineage of Mansa Musa. So then where did Mansa Musa, our historical billionaire, actually come from? He wasn't some random nobody who popped out of nowhere and suddenly became king. No, he was part of the Keita dynasty, a noble family that had ruled the Mali Empire since its very beginnings. Now I know, that might sound a little dry. But understanding his lineage helps us see that Mansa Musa's path to the throne wasn't some quick stroll through the park. It was shaped by the proud and mighty history of his family. The founder of the Keita dynasty, and the man who laid the very first stones of the Mali Empire, was none other than Sundiata Keita. If you've never heard of him, well, Sundiata was a legend. Think of him like Africa's version of Alexander the Great, or Genghis Khan, but with more sunshine and less horse riding. He united scattered little tribes and defeated the powerful Sasso Empire back in the 13th century, forming a vast and thriving empire. It was Sundiata who set up the systems, the laws and the trade networks, all of which Mansa Musa would later inherit, polish up and turn into something glorious. Mansa Musa's full name was Musa Keita. He was the grandson of Sundiata Keita, and the son of Abu Bakr, one of Sundiata's brothers. Now, he wasn't a direct heir to the throne in the classic father-to-son kind of way, but his place in the royal bloodline? Undeniable. Sounds a bit complicated, doesn't it? Like one of those big leafy family trees with too many branches going in all directions. But it shows something important. To become king, you didn't just need royal blood, you also needed a helping hand from destiny, and maybe a sprinkle of good fortune too. You see, succession in Mali wasn't always set in stone. Instead of automatically passing the crown from father to son, the throne could, at times, be passed to brothers, or even nephews if the council of nobles agreed to it, or if the reigning king had no heir of his own. That little loophole, or perhaps that golden opportunity, is how Musa found his opening. And now you might be wondering, what was so special about Musa's early years that prepared him for such a legendary future? Well, we're about to find out. The early years in preparation for the future. So, we now know that Mansa Musa hailed from the royal Keita lineage, but what was his life like before he became the richest king in recorded history? Unfortunately, historical records about his childhood and early years are rather scarce. And that's not too surprising. At the time, most records in West Africa were passed down orally. What little was written tended to focus on grand events and legendary figures, not the finer, more personal details of their daily lives. Still, we can make some educated guesses. As a member of the Keita royal family, it's safe to assume that Musa received a special kind of education. He likely studied the history and culture of the Mali Empire, its legal systems and governance, and most importantly, Islam. Islam had made its way into West Africa centuries earlier and had become the official religion of the ruling elite in Mali. Mastery of the Quran, Islamic teachings, and Sharia law was more than just recommended. It was practically required if one hoped to rule both legitimately and wisely. You can imagine it, a royal training program so intense, it would make today's Ivy League look like summer camp. But beyond religious and political schooling, Musa was probably also trained in the fine arts of administration, economics, and maybe even a bit of military strategy. Now, Musa wasn't exactly known as a battlefield commander, but understanding how to manage an army or oversee the empire's vast resources. That was essential. Royal family members were often entrusted with managing provinces or joining major trade caravans to get a hands-on understanding of Mali's economic machinery. Perhaps Musa himself took part in such duties, slowly building up the kind of real-world experience that can't be taught from a scroll. Another key element that shaped Musa's character was his exposure to scholars, merchants, and travelers from across the Islamic world. Mali was a crossroads of culture, and these encounters broadened his horizons. They gave him a deeper appreciation for the world beyond Mali's borders and for the richness of other civilizations. These early experiences planted the seeds of an idea, an ambition to transform Mali into a center of knowledge and culture. And as history would later show, Musa would bring that dream to life. Though we may not have many details, it's clear that Mansa Musa's greatness didn't come by accident. He was prepared. He was educated. And he was shaped by the very environment into which he was born and raised. And next up is the road to the throne, a coincidence of destiny? By now you might be wondering, how did Musa, a royal family member, yes but not exactly first in line, end up becoming the ruler of a mighty empire like Mali? Well, the answer lies in a rather unexpected event. A twist of fate, if you will. Or perhaps, a mysterious adventure written by destiny itself. You see, Musa's older brother, Mansa Abu Bakr II, was the ruler before him. A man with a restless spirit and a burning desire to explore the world beyond. Legend has it that Abu Bakr II became utterly obsessed with the idea of discovering the Great Sea to the west, which as we now know was the Atlantic Ocean. He believed there was a distant land waiting beyond the horizon, and he wanted to be the first to set foot on it. Sounds a bit mad, doesn't it? A king willingly giving up his throne to embark on a risky ocean voyage? Well, that's exactly what he did. For his first attempt, he sent out a fleet of 400 ships. He gave them strict instructions: sail west, report back. Only one ship ever returned. Its captain told a haunting tale of a powerful current that swallowed the fleet whole. But Abu Bakr II? He wasn't deterred. Quite the opposite. He became even more determined. So, for his second try, he went all in. He personally led a massive expedition. 2,000 ships loaded to the brim with gold, food, supplies, everything they might need to survive the unknown. But before setting sail into the mysterious blue, Abu Bakr II did one very important thing. He appointed Musa as regent, a temporary ruler to oversee the empire while he was away. A sensible choice. Musa was his brother, a loyal and capable royal. Now here's the twist. That second voyage? It never returned. No one knows for sure what happened. Maybe they were lost at sea. Maybe they did reach a new land and simply couldn't find their way back. Whatever the case, Mansa Abu Bakr II vanished, and with his disappearance the door to destiny swung open for Musa. With no word from the king, Musa, once a stand-in, a placeholder, became the official Mansa or king of the Mali Empire. There was no coup, no war, no bloodshed. Just a quiet, almost poetic passing of the crown through circumstance. And so, from a relatively unknown prince, Musa suddenly found himself holding the reins of a vast and wealthy empire. And from there, the tale of the richest king in history began. A story not just of gold, but of vision, of empire, and of a legacy that would echo through time. Chapter 1 came to a close, and with it we were given a glimpse into the historical backdrop of the Mali Empire before the time of Mansa Musa, his origins and the formative early years that shaped a future king. Next, let us wander into Chapter 2, Ascension and the First Reforms, where Mansa Musa begins the great journey of building his mighty empire. And the very first challenge? Facing obstacles and consolidating power. Becoming the Mansa of a vast empire like Mali was no easy feat. Even though Mansa Musa ascended the throne legitimately, he was immediately confronted with a mountain of challenges. Just imagine, one day you're handed the responsibility of running a giant corporation that stretches for thousands of kilometers, full of diverse tribes, multiple languages, and smoldering internal tensions. That kind of pressure? Enormous. One of Mansa Musa's top priorities was to solidify his authority. Although he was the rightful successor in such a sprawling empire, there were always local chieftains and tribal leaders who might not exactly jump at the chance to obey the central government. Musa needed to make his position crystal clear, to show everyone that he was no mere placeholder, but the true king capable of leadership and upholding stability. And he didn't do this by brute force alone, oh no, but with wisdom and diplomatic finesse. This meant restoring order, ensuring that even the far-flung provinces remained loyal to the Keita dynasty, ruling from the imperial capital of Niani. He may have embarked on royal tours, visiting newly annexed lands or regions bubbling with unrest. The goal? To let local leaders see the presence of royalty, feel the authority of the crown, and for Musa himself to gain a deeper understanding of the real condition of his empire. On top of that, internal security was a critical concern. The Mali Empire, for all its might, still had to deal with minor rebellions and occasional trouble from nomadic tribes along its borders. Mansa Musa had to make sure the army was strong enough to guard the trade routes, especially the routes of gold and salt, the economic lifeblood of the empire. This wasn't just about protecting assets. It was about maintaining the trust of the people and the merchants, those who needed a stable environment to do business. In short, the first years of Mansa Musa's reign were not a time to rest on one's laurels. Far from it. It was a period where he had to prove himself, working tirelessly to transform a promising empire into a solid, unified force, ready for the remarkable growth that was yet to come. He had to be part administrator, part diplomat, and, when needed, a sharp military strategist. From there, he set about restructuring the administration and establishing the rule of law. Once Mansa Musa had secured his power, and let's be honest, it was no small feat, he rolled up his royal sleeves and got to work on reorganizing the empire's administrative machinery. You see, an empire as vast as Mali couldn't possibly be governed effectively by just a handful of officials hanging around the capital, no matter how enthusiastic they were. What it needed was a clear, coherent system to manage resources, collect taxes, and maintain order across its sprawling lands. One of his most important reforms was the division of the empire into provinces, called farari. To each of these provinces he appointed loyal and capable officials known as farba. These were powerful governors, yes, but still very much accountable to Mansa himself. This clever setup allowed the central government to extend its reach all the way to the farthest edges of the empire, ensuring that the king's commands didn't just echo from the palace walls, but were actually carried out. It also made sure that policies weren't just suggestions, but actual rules that everyone had to follow, like it or not. Alongside administrative reform, Mansa Musa turned his attention to something every well-functioning empire needs: law and order. Under his reign, Sharia law, yes, the Islamic legal code, was more widely implemented in both civil and criminal matters, particularly in urban centers. This brought a sense of justice and stability, and also signaled Musa's deep commitment to Islam. And let's not forget that commitment wasn't just personal, it was a strategic way to unite a multi-ethnic empire under shared values. Courts were established, and judges known as Qadi were appointed to settle disputes. Whether you were rich or poor, merchant or farmer, you had a place to go if things got messy. Justice at last wasn't just for the elite. But here's where it gets interesting. Mansa Musa didn't just toss out traditional local customs in favor of religious law. Oh no, he was far too wise for that. As long as the local traditions didn't contradict the core principles of Islam, they were not only respected but woven into the broader legal framework. It was a graceful balancing act. A little bit of tradition, a little bit of reform, a dash of diplomacy, and a healthy respect for diversity. Mansa Musa wasn't the type to impose rigid laws with a hammer. Instead, he crafted a flexible, adaptive system, something that could serve a complex empire with many tongues, many tribes, and many ways of life. Thanks to these reforms, Mali gained a state apparatus that was not only efficient but also stable. It gave Mansa Musa the tools he needed to manage Mali's immense wealth, particularly its famed gold and salt resources, without everything descending into chaos. And with this rock-solid foundation in place, he could finally set his sights on grander projects. The kind that would turn Mali into a true powerhouse on the world map. Economic policy and the extraction of golden riches. Now, to speak of Mansa Musa without mentioning gold, well, that would be a rather glaring omission, wouldn't it? His economic policy was a textbook example of how a leader could harness and manage natural resources to usher in a golden, quite literally, age of prosperity for an entire nation. I mean, have you ever wondered how a West African kingdom came to resemble the central bank of the medieval world? Under the reign of Mansa Musa, Mali maintained tight control over the colossal gold mines of Bure and Wangara. And let's be clear, these weren't just your run-of-the-mill gold pits. These were treasure troves, glittering with enough gold to make even the wealthiest of sultans blink twice. Mansa Musa made sure the mining operations were meticulously organized and, this is the kicker, the majority of the gold extracted belonged directly to the royal family. That's right. The crown kept the lion's share. This allowed him to amass both a personal and national fortune of staggering proportions, laying the bedrock for all the grand projects that followed. But wait, there's more than just gold in this golden tale. Salt, believe it or not, was just as strategic. Yes, humble salt. In the context of medieval Africa, salt from mines like Tagaza in the north was every bit as valuable as the gold glittering in the south. Musa controlled the trade routes of this precious mineral with the same precision as he did the gold. The exchange of gold for salt wasn't just clever economics, it was a masterpiece of logistics and diplomacy. The blend of southern gold and northern salt, carried across the vast and perilous Sahara, transformed Mali into a commercial juggernaut, a marketplace the world could not ignore. And Mansa Musa? He didn't stop there. He gave a royal boost to international trade. Cities like Timbuktu and Jen didn't just serve as pit stops for camel caravans. They became bustling commercial hubs, magnets for merchants from across North Africa and the Middle East. Musa ensured the safety of trade routes, smoothed the path for foreign traders, and in doing so, increased the flow of wealth into his empire like a river fed by many streams. His brilliance in resource management and trade turned Mali into an empire dripping with wealth. But this prosperity wasn't hoarded in palace vaults alone. No, it was invested, wisely and generously, into infrastructure, education, and the arts. Mali, under his vision, became a beacon of civilization, a cultural jewel in the sands of history. But that's a story for another chapter. Let's just say Mansa Musa's economic policies weren't just about counting coins. They were the foundation, the launch pad really, for the grand dreams he would bring to life. Reaching out to the world, the first steps of foreign policy. While deeply engaged in strengthening the empire from within and boosting the economy, Mansa Musa also began taking his first tentative steps into the realm of foreign policy. He understood, quite wisely, that a powerful empire couldn't thrive in isolation, no matter how much gold it had stacked away. To maintain prosperity and security, Mali needed to cultivate good relations with its neighbors and with the major powers in the Islamic world. Now, that might sound a bit complicated, but at its heart, it was all about building Mali's brand on the international stage. One of the top priorities was establishing diplomatic ties with North African nations, especially the Islamic kingdoms like the Marinid dynasty in Morocco and the Mamluk dynasty in Egypt. These countries weren't just valuable trade partners. They were crucial gateways connecting Mali to the broader Islamic world and, with a bit of luck, even to Europe. Good relations with them would help protect trade caravans, encourage merchants to journey to Mali, and unlock all sorts of new opportunities. Mansa Musa also employed Islam as a savvy tool of diplomacy. As a devout Muslim ruler, he built mosques, supported Islamic scholars, and encouraged his people to embrace the faith. This not only helped unify the empire under a shared spiritual identity but also allowed Mali to be recognized as a respectable and contributing member of the greater Islamic world. In doing so, he shaped Mali's image as not only wealthy, but also cultured and pious. And in the international relations game, that kind of reputation goes a long way. It's likely that Malian envoys were dispatched to foreign courts, bearing lavish gifts, especially gold, to showcase the empire's wealth and Mansa Musa's might. These journeys weren't just about making friends, they were also learning opportunities. The Malians observed other cultures, gathered insights into scientific and technological advancements, and brought back knowledge that could help the empire thrive. These early moves in foreign policy laid the groundwork for what would become the most legendary event of Mansa Musa's life, the fabled pilgrimage to Mecca. A journey that would send ripples through the world and etch his name permanently into the annals of history. And it wasn't just a religious trip, it was a full-blown spectacle. A dazzling display of Mali's power, piety, and yes, an absolutely overwhelming amount of gold. Let us now continue with Chapter 3, The Pilgrimage to Mecca, a journey that shocked the world. This is the moment when the name of Mansa Musa was truly carved into the pages of world history. Part 1. The importance of Hajj and Mansa Musa's big decision. Did you know that for a Muslim king in the 14th century, performing the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, wasn't just a religious duty? Oh no, it was also a bold declaration of power and wealth. Hajj, after all, is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. And for someone as fabulously rich as Mansa Musa, fulfilling this obligation was practically written in gold. But here's the twist. Mansa Musa didn't just go on a regular pilgrimage. He turned it into a full-blown historical spectacle, a dazzling display of Mali's unimaginable prosperity. Now, his decision to go on Hajj wasn't driven by pure piety alone. Oh no. It was also an exceptionally clever strategic move. Think about it. How do you get the whole world to notice a mighty yet distant empire tucked away in West Africa? How do you attract more scholars, traders, and artists to your lands? Why, a grand pilgrimage to Mecca, of course. This journey was his golden ticket to introduce Mali to the major powers of the Islamic world, many of whom, up to that point, had barely heard a whisper about this wealthy corner of Africa. Mansa Musa's goal wasn't just to reach Mecca. He wanted to leave a lasting impression. He aimed to show the world that Mali wasn't just rich in gold and salt, but also in intellect, culture, and spiritual devotion. He wanted to build relationships with leading Islamic scholars, to bring home new knowledge and technologies. This journey, this glittering jaw-dropping caravan, would send a powerful message across continents. Mali has arrived. Now, preparing for a journey that stretches thousands of kilometers across unforgiving desert terrain, with thousands of attendants and literal tons of gold, well, that's not exactly a weekend getaway. It demanded meticulous planning and colossal resources. And Mansa Musa did not hesitate to pour everything he had into it. He understood something crucial. This was more than just a trip. It was an investment, in reputation, in diplomacy, and in the long-term political and economic future of the Mali Empire. He was placing a very large bet. And the results would exceed even his wildest expectations. Part 2. The Pilgrimage Army and its unimaginable splendor. Picture this. A colossal caravan winding its way across the Sahara Desert like a golden river shimmering under the African sun. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage in the year 1324 was unlike any pilgrimage before it, or after it for that matter. It was a dazzling parade of wealth so extravagant, so absurdly excessive, that it left the entire known world blinking in disbelief. His caravan was said to be enormous, estimated at around 60,000 people. This wasn't just Mansa Musa himself, his queen, and a few royal cousins tagging along. No, this was a full-scale mobile empire, senior officials, soldiers, slaves, servants, and thousands upon thousands of camels. Each slave reportedly carried a gold bar weighing approximately 2.3 kilograms. Just that detail alone should give you a mental image of the sheer volume of gold this royal parade was hauling. And now for the jaw-dropping part. 100 camels, each one loaded with pure gold, carrying about 136 kilograms apiece. That's 13,600 kilograms of gold, just on camelback. Wrap your head around that for a moment. It's the kind of gold load that could tip the scales of any economy foolish enough to stand in its path. Among the camels were some specially designated to carry luxury garments, food supplies, and enough drinking water to last for months in the desert. Soldiers escorted the caravan for protection, while attendants tended to the king's every need, along with the needs of his rather extensive entourage. This was no mere religious journey. This was a royal procession, a living monument to Mali's boundless wealth and influence. As this golden tide flowed through cities like Cairo, Egypt, the locals spilled into the streets, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, to witness the spectacle. Arab historians who recorded these events were astonished, genuinely stunned, by Mansa Musa's opulence. They described how the king and his retinue spent gold with almost reckless generosity, not just to shop, mind you, but to gift. He gave to the poor, to scholars, to mosques. It was a golden reign of goodwill. And this very grandeur, this almost mythical generosity, sent shockwaves across the known world, placing the name Mansa Musa and the Mali Empire squarely on the global map in the most unforgettable way imaginable. Part 3. The Economic Impact and the Golden Chaos in Egypt. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage wasn't just a grand spectacle. It had real and far-reaching economic consequences, especially in the places where he made a stop. And none felt that golden shock more than Egypt. Now picture this. You're in Cairo, minding your own business, when suddenly, tens of tons of gold flood the market. What do you think would happen? When Mansa Musa's entourage arrived in Cairo, they spent gold with remarkable generosity. Mansa Musa didn't just shop for himself and his retinue. He handed out gold to the poor, gave lavish gifts to officials, and financed the construction or renovation of mosques. His generosity, though rooted in goodwill and religious devotion, had one very unexpected side effect. It became a textbook case of inflation. When an enormous amount of gold is injected into a market all at once, the value of gold, well, it takes a nosedive. Imagine, if one gold dinar used to buy you 10 loaves of bread. Now with gold overflowing in the streets, that same dinar might only get you 5. Which means, the price of everything else, food, fabric, essential goods, skyrocketed. The result? Egypt's economy was thrown off balance for the next 12 years. Merchants and everyday Egyptians struggled through a period of rapidly rising prices. Contemporary Arab historians recorded the chaos in vivid detail. One such historian, Al-Amari, noted that Mansa Musa was so generous. He reduced the value of gold in Egypt and stripped it of its preciousness. But Mansa Musa wasn't entirely blind to the consequences. On his way back from Mecca, he attempted to reverse some of the damage by buying gold back from the Egyptian market at high interest rates. This effort, while unable to fully undo the harm, at least showed that he recognized his impact and sought to rebalance the market. In any case, the episode went down in history as undeniable proof of the extraordinary wealth of Mansa Musa and the mighty Mali Empire. Part 4. Elevating Mali's reputation on the world stage. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca wasn't just an economic earthquake, it was a public relations miracle for the Mali Empire. Before this grand journey, Mali was a wealthy but rather low-profile empire, known to a few but hardly a household name in Europe or the Middle East. But after the pilgrimage? Well, things took quite the turn. The trip catapulted Mali into the minds of rulers, scholars and merchants all across the Islamic world, and even into parts of Europe. Arab historians like Al-Amari and Ibn Khaldun wrote about it in great detail, describing Mansa Musa's staggering wealth, deep religious devotion and formidable power. These tales didn't stay tucked away in dusty scrolls. They spread like wildfire through markets, coffee houses and libraries, turning Mansa Musa into something of a legendary figure. This newfound fame came with serious perks for Mali. First and foremost, it attracted scholars and architects to Timbuktu and other Malian cities. Mansa Musa rolled out the welcome mat, offering patronage and excellent working conditions. These scholars brought with them knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, medicine and other disciplines, helping turn Mali into a major center of learning. Secondly, it encouraged international merchants to set their sights on Mali. The trans-Saharan trade routes grew busier than ever, as word spread far and wide. Mali had gold, Mali had stability, and Mali had a king with very deep pockets. This influx of trade further boosted Mali's economy and expanded its commercial networks. Third, and this might be the most amusing of all, the event even left its mark on European maps. In the 14th century world maps of Europe, especially the Catalan Atlas of 1375, you can spot a majestic African king seated on a golden throne, holding a scepter in one hand and a massive gold nugget in the other. That's none other than Mansa Musa himself, labeled as the Lord of the Blacks, and the richest king in the world. It's a clear sign of just how far and wide his influence had spread. This pilgrimage was far more than a personal religious duty. It was a grand marketing campaign masterminded by Mansa Musa himself, one that transformed Mali from a regional powerhouse into a name recognized across the globe. It's proof of his far-reaching vision, not just a wealthy king but a skilled diplomat and communications genius ahead of his time. We now continue with Chapter 4, Gold, Glory and Prosperity, the Height of Power, where we'll witness how Mansa Musa used his extraordinary wealth to lift Mali to the very pinnacle of imperial might. Part 1, Gold Mining and Trade Domination. You've probably heard a lot about Mansa Musa's wealth. But how exactly did he get all that gold? The secret lies in his tight control over gold mines and his domination of key trade routes. Just think about it, owning the world's most precious resource at the time and knowing how to run the operation wisely? That's the kind of combination that turns a kingdom into a gold-plated legend. Under Mansa Musa's reign, the Mali Empire controlled two major gold mines. Beret, located in what is now southern Mali, and Wangara, whose exact location remains a bit of a historical mystery, but it's believed to be somewhere near modern-day Senegal and Guinea. These weren't your easy-to-dig, glittering surface mines. Oh no, these were sedimentary gold deposits that required locals to dig deep into the earth to retrieve their treasure. But under Mansa Musa's leadership, gold extraction became a well-organized affair. A large portion of the gold didn't just sit around, it went straight into the royal treasury. This essentially made Mansa Musa the man who controlled the world's gold supply, at least as far as the 14th century was concerned. Not a bad title, right? But having gold is one thing. Getting it to market, and trading it wisely, is a whole different golden ball game. Enter the mighty trans-Saharan trade routes, Mansa Musa ensured absolute security for caravans crossing the vast and perilous desert. These weren't your average camel trains. We're talking about enormous caravans loaded with gold, salt, ivory and other luxurious goods, escorted by well-armed troops who made sure not even a grain of salt went missing. This ironclad safety attracted traders from North Africa and the Middle East like bees to a golden flower. And business? Oh, it was booming. Cities like Timbuktu, Gao, and Jen transformed into bustling trade hubs. Here, gold was swapped for salt, a hot commodity in West Africa, textiles, spices, and artisan goods from far-off civilizations. Mansa Musa didn't just rake in profits from taxing these trades. No, he dove right into the business himself, ensuring the biggest cuts flowed directly into his own pockets. He understood quite clearly that to maintain an empire, you needed a rock-solid economy. And he was not the kind of ruler to shy away from using every available resource to make that happen. Part 2. Building Timbuktu, the jewel of the Sahara. If there is one city that truly embodies the prosperity and vision of Mansa Musa, it is undoubtedly Timbuktu. From a humble desert stopover, Timbuktu was transformed by Mansa Musa into a dazzling urban center, an icon of Mali's power, knowledge, and wealth. Sounds like something out of a fairy tale? Well, this one happens to be historical fact. Mansa Musa invested enormously in the development of Timbuktu's infrastructure. After his famous pilgrimage to Mecca, he returned with a whole caravan of scholars, architects, and gifted artisans from Egypt and other parts of the Islamic world. Under the guidance of the brilliant architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, whom Mansa Musa had met in Cairo, many awe-inspiring buildings began to rise from the desert sands. The most outstanding of them all? The Zingareber Mosque, a masterpiece made of sun-baked mud brick, still standing tall to this very day. But it was more than just a place of worship. It became a major hub of learning, and that was just the beginning. Mansa Musa also commissioned the construction of the royal palace, Madugu, along with bustling markets, schools, and grand libraries. He turned Timbuktu from a sleepy desert town into a model Islamic city, complete with majestic buildings and refined design. Yet Timbuktu wasn't only an architectural marvel. It became the intellectual magnet of the Islamic world. Scholars, poets, scientists, and jurists flocked to the city, bringing with them books and knowledge as precious as gold, sometimes more so. Mansa Musa had deep respect for education and wisdom. He actively supported the building of vast libraries that housed thousands of priceless manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, law, history, and theology. Universities like Sankore rose to international fame, becoming some of the leading academic centers of the medieval world. Students traveled great distances to study there, drawn by the promise of knowledge in the heart of the desert. Mansa Musa's heavy investment in Timbuktu wasn't merely about displaying power. It was about crafting a lasting legacy, one rooted in culture and intellect. He wanted Mali to be remembered not just for its gold, but for its brilliance and sophistication. Under his reign, Timbuktu truly became the jewel of the Sahara, a radiant beacon in the medieval world. Part 3. Promoting art, architecture, and education. Mansa Musa was not just a skilled ruler and a wealthy man. Oh no, he was also a grand patron of the arts, architecture, and education. With his overflowing coffers of gold, he fostered a thriving environment for culture and knowledge, transforming Mali into a dazzling center of civilization in West Africa. Just imagine, if you had that kind of money, what would you do? Buy an island? A fleet of camels? Mansa Musa, on the other hand, used his fortune to build an empire that was not only rich in material wealth, but also in spirit and intellect. After his pilgrimage to Mecca, Mansa Musa returned home with a caravan full, not just of gold or spices, but of scholars, architects, engineers, and artisans from the advanced Islamic regions of Egypt and Andalusia. That's Islamic Spain, in case you were wondering. These learned folks brought with them fresh ideas, architectural styles, and building techniques that were practically revolutionary in Mali at the time. They helped construct magnificent buildings, with the most famous examples being the mosques and universities of Timbuktu and Gao. One standout figure was the architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, who oversaw the construction of the Zingareber Mosque in Timbuktu, along with many other important structures. Now, this wasn't just some slapdash brick and mud job. Al-Sahili introduced more advanced methods of construction using fired bricks and lime mortar, blending them seamlessly with local design sensibilities to create buildings that were not only unique, but built to last. It was a clear demonstration of Mansa Musa's wealth, but more importantly of his ability to absorb and adapt foreign cultures with finesse. As for education, Mansa Musa regarded it as a cornerstone of his empire. He established and generously funded countless madrasas, Islamic schools, and public libraries. The University of Sankore in Timbuktu blossomed into one of the leading academic institutions in the Islamic world. Tens of thousands of students came from far and wide to study Islamic law, astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and literature. The libraries of Timbuktu were said to house hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, a massive treasure trove of knowledge that rivaled even the wealth stored in his royal vaults. By investing in the arts, architecture, and education, Mansa Musa elevated Mali to an entirely new status. He transformed it from a mere economic powerhouse into a major center of culture and learning, attracting some of the brightest minds of the age. You see, he didn't just build houses out of gold. He built temples of wisdom, leaving behind a legacy that even today gleams brighter than gold. Part 4. Establishing diplomacy and expanding influence. The wealth and prestige Mansa Musa amassed after his pilgrimage to Mecca allowed him to solidify his foreign policy, extend Mali's influence beyond the borders of Africa, and establish ties with powerful nations far and wide. He wasn't just a wealthy king, he was a savvy diplomat who understood the value of maintaining good relations with the outside world. After returning from Mecca, Mansa Musa's fame spread like desert wildfire across North Africa and the Middle East. Royal courts such as the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt and the Marinid dynasty in Morocco quickly learned of Mali's golden riches and rising power. Mansa Musa seized this opportunity to strengthen both trade and diplomatic relations. He sent envoys to these courts, bearing extravagant gifts, often gold of course, as a sign of goodwill and imperial strength. Nothing says, "Let's be friends," like a sack of pure gold. Establishing embassies and keeping regular contact with other Islamic nations became a vital part of his grand strategy. This not only secured Mali's trade routes but also opened the doors to new technologies, fresh ideas, and vibrant cultures. For instance, the scholars and engineers he brought back from Egypt didn't just come to Timbuktu to build, they came to enlighten, spreading knowledge and helping Mali integrate more deeply into the intellectual and cultural current of the Islamic world. Mansa Musa also showed finesse in managing relationships with neighboring lands in West Africa. He cleverly balanced soft power, through trade and shared religion, and hard power like, well, the occasional military nudge. By controlling trade routes and gold mines, he firmly established Mali's reputation as a regional powerhouse. It's fair to say that Mansa Musa's peak of power wasn't built on gold alone, but on his strategic vision of connecting Mali to the wider world. He turned a West African empire into a name known and respected on the international stage, a proud member of the global Islamic community. He didn't just make Mali rich, he made Mali magnificent in the eyes of the world. We shall now continue with Chapter 5, The Legacy of Architecture and Knowledge, where we explore the grand contributions of Mansa Musa in the realm of architecture and wisdom. Yes, that's right, he didn't just carry gold, he also carried ideas, and maybe a few blueprints too. Part 1. A Vision for an Islamic Scholarly Center. You've already seen just how incredibly wealthy Mansa Musa was, and what he chose to do with that gold during his pilgrimage to Mecca. But what truly made him great wasn't just the shiny mountain of treasure he possessed. No, it was his vision. His dream of transforming Mali into a dazzling center of Islamic scholarship. He understood something that many rich rulers overlook. Material wealth is fleeting, but knowledge and culture? Those are the things that last. After returning from Mecca, Mansa Musa didn't just bring back gold. Oh no, he came home with an elite entourage. Scholars, architects, engineers, and artisans, carefully recruited from the great intellectual centers of the Islamic world like Cairo and Andalusia. Yes, that's Islamic Spain. He invited them to Mali with promises of royal patronage, excellent working conditions, and a vibrant environment where their talents could shine. This, folks, was not just generosity, it was strategy. A brilliant move to import knowledge and cutting-edge innovation into his empire. His goal? To turn Mali's major cities, especially the famed Timbuktu, into beacons of wisdom across West Africa. He didn't want Timbuktu to be just a bustling trade hub. He wanted it to be a place where scholars could research, teach, and share ideas freely. He believed that education and religion were the keys to strengthening the empire, fostering unity and laying the groundwork for sustainable growth. To make this vision a reality, Mansa Musa invested heavily in educational infrastructure. He built Islamic schools, madrasas, libraries, and grand mosques. He also encouraged the collection and duplication of precious manuscripts from all corners of the Islamic world, slowly transforming Timbuktu into a colossal treasure trove of knowledge. This vision of his wasn't some far-fetched dream. Mansa Musa made it happen. And in doing so, he left behind a cultural and intellectual legacy that still echoes through the ages. He proved that money can buy many things, but if you want to build a truly great empire, you'll need wisdom and a little bit of vision. Part 2. The University of Sankore and the Libraries of Timbuktu? If you're someone with a soft spot for the history of education, then the University of Sankore in Timbuktu during the time of Mansa Musa is sure to leave you pleasantly stunned. This was no ordinary school. It was one of the leading academic centers of the medieval Islamic world, on par with the grand universities of Cairo or Baghdad. Yes, Timbuktu. You heard that right. That name your high school geography teacher loved to drop like it was the edge of the earth? Turns out, it was once the center of intellectual gravity. The University of Sankore wasn't a single grand building with ivy-covered walls and lecture halls. No, it was a network, a constellation if you will, of madrasas, Islamic schools, and learning spaces orbiting around the Sankore Mosque. Each madrasa was funded by either a wealthy family or a generous scholar, and each one specialized in different fields of study. The result? A vibrant, buzzing academic ecosystem that would make even modern universities blush. Tens of thousands of students from across the Islamic world, from North Africa to the Middle East, flocked to Timbuktu to study at Sankore. And the curriculum? Well, it was nothing short of spectacular. Sure, they studied Islamic law, fiqh, and theology, naturally, but they also dove deep into astronomy, mathematics, medicine, history, geography, and literature. The professors were not just learned men. They were walking libraries, wise sages wrapped in robes, training generation after generation of scholars, administrators, and judges for the Mali Empire. Now, right alongside the university were Timbuktu's legendary libraries, gigantic storehouses of knowledge. It's estimated that hundreds of thousands of manuscripts were housed here, turning Timbuktu into one of the greatest intellectual treasure troves of its time. And these weren't just dusty religious texts, though there were plenty of those too. No, these manuscripts covered everything from science and philosophy to literature from across the Islamic world. The act of copying and collecting these manuscripts wasn't just encouraged by Mansa Musa, it was funded, championed, and deeply respected. The development of the University of Sankore and the libraries of Timbuktu stands as a shining testament to Mansa Musa's reverence for knowledge. He didn't just want a wealthy empire, he wanted an enlightened one. He created a world where learning was celebrated, research was sacred, and wisdom was considered the most precious treasure of all. And that, dear listener, might just be the richest legacy he ever left behind, far more enduring than any pile of glittering gold. Part 3. Islamic Architecture and Building Techniques. Beyond his passion for knowledge, Mansa Musa also left behind an architectural legacy that's nothing short of jaw-dropping. He used his immense wealth to construct monumental and intricate buildings that reflected a rich blend of Islamic architectural principles and traditional West African craftsmanship. After returning from his pilgrimage to Mecca, Mansa Musa brought back a brilliant Andalusian architect by the name of Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. Now this wasn't just any old builder. Al-Sahili introduced cutting-edge construction techniques from the Islamic world to Mali, most notably the use of fired bricks and lime mortar. Before that, most buildings in Mali were made from adobe, mud bricks, and wood. The fusion of these new techniques with local materials gave rise to a unique architectural style. Sturdy, beautiful, and built to last, kind of like the medieval version of sustainable design. The most iconic structure, and the architectural crown jewel of Mansa Musa's reign, is the Jingareber Mosque in Timbuktu. Constructed under al-Sahili's watchful eye, this mosque is a masterpiece of West African Islamic design, with towering walls, pointed minarets, and intricate decorative details. It served not only as a place of worship but also as a vital center for community life and learning. But Mansa Musa didn't stop at Jingareber. Oh no, he was on a bit of a building spree. He commissioned several other mosques and palaces in cities like Gao and Jen. For example, the Sankor Mosque, also in Timbuktu, and the Sidi Yahya Mosque were built or expanded under his rule. These buildings weren't just for praying, they stood as proud symbols of imperial power and prosperity. Mansa Musa's investment in architecture wasn't merely about flaunting wealth. It was a strategic way to strengthen Islam throughout the empire and to provide meaningful public spaces for his people. These buildings became cultural landmarks, shaping the urban landscape of Mali and leaving an architectural imprint that still resonates today. His legacy stands as a vivid testament to what happens when talent, vision, and plenty of gold come together. Part 4. The influence on Mali's culture and society. But Mansa Musa's legacy wasn't just a tale of gold bricks and scholarly books. No, it went much deeper, weaving its way into the very fabric of Mali's culture and society. He shaped not only a materially rich empire but one that thrived in spirit and intellect too. One of his most profound influences? The rise and strengthening of Islam. You see, Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim, truly devout not just in name. And he encouraged, quite enthusiastically, the practice of Islam across the entire empire. He built mosques, funded Islamic scholars, and ensured that Sharia law was implemented in legal affairs. This didn't just unify the many different tribes under a shared faith, it also connected Mali more closely to the vast Islamic world beyond its borders. Imagine that, Timbuktu chatting, metaphorically of course, with Cairo and Mecca. With the flourishing of education and knowledge came the rise of a new intellectual class. Scholars, lawyers, and teachers trained at Sankor and other madrasas played key roles in managing the empire, spreading knowledge and maintaining social order. It was quite literally a brainy renaissance. Literacy improved, curiosity bloomed, and suddenly Mali wasn't just a wealthy empire, it was a learned one. Culturally speaking, Mali became something of a melting pot. Interaction with other Islamic civilizations brought fresh ingredients into the cultural stew. Art, music, literature, and customs from North Africa and the Middle East were blended with local traditions, resulting in a Mali culture that was as vibrant as it was unique. Take the Arabic script, for instance. It became more commonly used, helping Mali preserve its stories, history, and literature in written form. An upgrade from oral storytelling, one might say, though griots might beg to differ. However, let's not paint it all in gold leaf. This wealth and blossoming culture were mostly concentrated in major urban centers like Timbuktu, Gao, and Jen. Rural areas and distant tribal communities might not have felt the full glow of the Golden Age. But still, Mansa Musa ushered in a golden era for Mali, a time when the empire reached its peak not just in terms of economy and power, but also in culture and knowledge. He left behind a legacy that is, to this day, etched into the pages of history, not just in Mali but across the world. Quite a feat for one man with a camel caravan of gold, wouldn't you say? We now continue with Chapter 6, Diplomacy and Expanding Influence, where we'll explore how Mansa Musa extended Mali's reach far beyond its borders, not with swords but with strategy, and a lot of gold. Part 1. Strengthening Ties with the Islamic World. You probably still remember Mansa Musa's legendary pilgrimage to Mecca, a journey that made Mali's name echo across continents. But let's be honest, that wasn't just a spiritual trip. Oh no. It was a masterclass in diplomacy, cloaked in religious devotion. Mansa Musa used this event to build bridges with other Islamic powers, flinging open the doors to trade and cultural exchange with all the flourish of a golden fanfare. After his return, his reputation didn't just follow him. It outran him, spreading like wildfire across royal courts and trading hubs. Arab historians, who witnessed his generosity and sheer extravagance firsthand, couldn't stop talking about the Golden King of Mali. And thus, a wave of curiosity, and let's face it, a bit of envy, washed over the Islamic world. Mansa Musa, ever the savvy statesman, knew exactly how to ride this media effect. He took the initiative to establish regular diplomatic channels with key dynasties in North Africa and the Middle East. Envoys from Mali, armed with glittering gifts, yes, gold was absolutely involved, were dispatched to courts such as the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt and the Marinid dynasty in Morocco. These weren't just polite social calls. No, they were real talks about trade, security, and even scholarly cooperation. Because when Mali shows up with gifts, people listen. Mansa Musa also understood something crucial. Islam was more than a religion, it was a unifying force. By showing deep piety and generously supporting Islamic institutions, he reinforced Mali's place within the Ummah, the global Islamic community. This earned him the trust and respect of other Muslim rulers, making diplomatic and commercial relations smoother than ever. And the benefits? Oh, they were more than just spiritual. These strengthened ties brought economic advantages, political leverage, and even access to new ideas and technologies from more advanced civilizations. In the end, Mansa Musa transformed fame into real-world power, raising Mali from a regional empire to a serious player on the international stage. Part 2. Controlling trade routes and securing the borders. To maintain his prosperity and influence, Mansa Musa didn't just sit back and admire his piles of gold. No, he continuously controlled and protected the empire's vital trade routes, while also strengthening the borders of Mali. Think about it, having gold without a safe way to move or trade it, is kind of like having a camel with no legs. It might be impressive, but it's not going anywhere. The trans-Saharan trade routes were Mali's economic lifelines. Thousands of camels loaded with gold, salt, ivory and other precious goods trekked across harsh and hazardous lands. Mansa Musa invested heavily in making sure these caravans were safe. He maintained a well-organized army that regularly patrolled the roads, suppressing banditry and fending off attacks from nomadic tribes. This created a secure and reliable environment for merchants, encouraging more and more of them to bring their business to Mali. After all, who wouldn't want to trade in a place where your camels come home with all four legs, and your profits still intact? Beyond just protecting the roads, Mansa Musa also expanded and strengthened Mali's control over key areas along these trade routes. For example, holding the salt mines of Tagaza, and cities like Gao and Timbuktu, was absolutely critical. These cities weren't just bustling trading hubs. They were also strategic military strongholds. And border security? That was a top priority. Sure, Mali was a mighty empire, but it still had potential enemies lurking in neighboring regions. Mansa Musa made sure his military was strong enough to guard the empire's edges, prevent intrusions and keep things stable within. But military strength wasn't just about defense. It was also a diplomatic tool, a gentle reminder to everyone else that Mali wasn't just wealthy, but also perfectly capable of protecting its treasures and interests. Thanks to these policies, Mansa Musa established a stable and secure trade network that helped Mali remain the world's leading supplier of gold, and the greatest commercial center in West Africa. Not only did this bring in immense profits, it also solidified his power and influence across the region. Part 3. Territorial expansion and the annexation of new lands. While Mansa Musa is most fondly remembered for his immense wealth and cultural contributions, he was also a ruler who significantly expanded the territory of the Mali Empire. Sometimes, in order to maintain influence and power, territorial expansion becomes, well, somewhat unavoidable, especially in the medieval world where diplomacy often came with a side of sword. Before his reign, Mali was already a vast empire, but Mansa Musa took it to new heights, quite literally stretching the map in all directions. He launched military campaigns to annex neighboring kingdoms and territories into his growing empire. This wasn't just a power move, it was also a strategic effort to gain control over more resources, particularly gold mines and those ever-important trade routes. One of his most notable military achievements was the annexation of Timbuktu and Gao into the empire. Now, Timbuktu had already been a thriving trade hub before Mansa Musa came along, but under his rule, it was fortified and flourished like never before. Securing full control over these cities brought not just economic benefits. It also solidified Mali's position as a major powerhouse in the region. Mansa Musa's army was well organized and well equipped. They weren't just a band of warriors with spears and big dreams, they were a formidable force capable of executing efficient territorial campaigns. Yet, Musa's expansion wasn't all blood and battles. In fact, it often combined military strength with clever diplomacy. Many lands were likely annexed through treaties or voluntary submission, as local chiefs realized it wasn't so bad living under the protection of a strong and prosperous empire like Mali. Who wouldn't want a piece of that golden pie? This expansion helped Mansa Musa tighten his grip on a vast region of West Africa, creating a more unified economic and political bloc. It not only boosted the empire's resources but also established a buffer zone to protect vital centers like Niani, Timbuktu, and Gao from external threats. So yes, Mansa Musa wasn't just rich. He was also a masterful military and political strategist, quietly moving borders and building an empire while the rest of the world was still catching its breath from his golden pilgrimage. Part 4. The influence of Mali on the world map of its time. Thanks to his clever diplomacy, extraordinary wealth, and territorial expansion, Mansa Musa placed the Mali Empire firmly on the world map of the 14th century. Before his reign, many in Europe, and even parts of the Middle East, knew little if anything about the kingdoms of West Africa. But after his rule, Mali became a household name, a symbol of wealth and power. And gold. Lots and lots of gold. The clearest proof of this influence? Mansa Musa's appearance on the Catalan Atlas of 1375, one of the most important medieval world maps of Europe. There he sits, rather regally, on a throne in West Africa, holding a scepter in one hand and a giant gold nugget in the other. The caption reads, "Lord of the Black People, King of Mali." Well, that settles it. When you make it onto the map holding bling, you've officially gone global. Mali's newfound fame didn't go unnoticed by European merchants and explorers. Even though direct relations between Mali and Europe were still somewhat limited at the time, tales of Mansa Musa's unimaginable riches sparked curiosity, and lit a fire under the feet of future adventurers. You could say he accidentally kick-started the age of African exploration, without ever meaning to. Arab scholars and travelers like Ibn Battuta, who visited Mali after Mansa Musa's time but still sang the empire's praises, and Al-Amari, left behind valuable writings that painted a vivid picture of a powerful, prosperous empire with a thriving culture. These weren't just dry historical notes. No, they were vibrant snapshots of a golden age. Pun absolutely intended. In short, Mansa Musa wasn't just the king of Mali. He was a global figure, one who shifted the world's perception of Africa. He proved that the continent was home to dazzling civilizations, powerful monarchs, and wealth that could put even European kings to shame. He left behind a legacy of diplomacy and global influence that few African rulers, before or since, could ever match. We now continue with Chapter 7, The Final Years and the Gradual Decline, where we'll explore the twilight of Mansa Musa's life, and the first signs that this once mighty empire might be starting to creak at the edges. Part 1. The Last Years of Mansa Musa's Reign. Mansa Musa ruled the Mali Empire for about 25 years, from around 1312 to 1337, give or take a few years depending on which ancient scroll, or modern historian, you consult. That's a pretty long reign, long enough for him to completely reshape Mali, turning it from a strong regional kingdom into a global powerhouse. But as with all great dynasties, the sun eventually begins to set. Challenges arise and the winds of change start to stir, especially when a leader of his caliber begins his slow exit from the stage of history. In the final years of his reign, Mansa Musa remained focused on strengthening the foundations he had so carefully laid. He continued to emphasize internal stability across his vast empire. That meant upholding the rule of law, managing resources efficiently, and making sure the trade routes, those golden lifelines of the empire, remained safe and secure. After all, even when you're on top of the world, a giant empire still needs constant tending. Otherwise, little cracks, be they local rebellions or outside threats, can start to split the whole thing apart. He also continued his patronage of scholars and artists, ensuring that Timbuktu remained a beacon of knowledge and culture. Construction projects likely carried on, though perhaps not with the same grand scale as during the heady days after his famous pilgrimage to Mecca. Maintaining and expanding libraries and schools became an important mission, to ensure his intellectual legacy would echo through the ages. However, like all mortals, Mansa Musa couldn't escape the realities of age and health. Though historical records are rather shy about the details of his condition, running a massive empire was no small feat. It surely demanded energy, sharpness, and let's be honest, probably a lot of stamina. And so, thoughts naturally turned to succession, finding a worthy heir who could keep the golden gears of Mali turning smoothly. All in all, the final stretch of Mansa Musa's reign was a time of consolidation and calm. He had laid down a firm foundation, and though he wasn't shaking the world with grand pilgrimages anymore, he was still very much the captain of the ship, guiding Mali forward, steady and sure, reaping the harvest of the seeds he had planted long ago. Part 2. Succession and the Transfer of Power. Succession has always been one of the greatest challenges for any empire, and Mali was no exception. When Mansa Musa passed away around the year 1337, the throne was handed down to his son Maganai. The transfer of power went fairly smoothly, a testament to the preparation and stability Mansa Musa had carefully established during his later years. However, while Maganai was the rightful heir and had been groomed for leadership, he didn't quite possess the vision or commanding presence of his legendary father. This, unfortunately, is a tale as old as monarchy itself. One brilliant king ushers in a golden age, only for his successor to fumble the inheritance like a distracted juggler. Maganai may have benefited from the immense wealth and global fame his father left behind, but he lacked the decisiveness, administrative skill, or let's say the charm to carry the torch forward. Under Maganai's reign, Mali remained a rich and powerful empire, but the cracks began to show. Historical records suggest that Maganai didn't quite maintain the same sharp focus on managing the empire's economic and political machinery as Mansa Musa had. Construction projects may have slowed to a crawl, and once proud libraries or schools might have found themselves a little less prioritized. Declines in leadership tend to come with consequences. For instance, the far-flung provinces may have experienced a loosening of central control, giving local chieftains a little too much room to assert their autonomy. Trade routes, once protected with near-religious devotion, could have become less secure, leading to drops in commerce and, more importantly for the royal coffers, revenue. Though Maganai's reign was relatively short, it marked the beginning of a gradual decline for the Mali Empire. It served as a reminder that no matter how mighty an empire may seem, its greatness hinges on the vision and skill of its leaders. Wealth, after all, is just one part of the puzzle. It's the ability to govern, with foresight, grace, and maybe a touch of flair, that truly determines whether greatness endures. Part 3. Internal Challenges and Fragmentation. After the reign of Mansa Musa and his immediate successor, internal challenges began to creep more clearly into the picture, slowly but surely weakening the very structure of the Mali Empire. Now, to be fair, Mansa Musa had laid down a rock-solid foundation. But as with any vast and diverse empire, cracks are bound to show if there isn't strong and consistent leadership holding things together with both hands, and maybe a few toes too. One of the biggest problems? The weakening of central authority. Following Mansa Musa's exit, the kings who came after him, well, let's just say they didn't quite have his flair. They lacked the charisma and competence to keep a tight grip on those faraway provinces. And when you loosen your grip, the chiefs and local governors, known as Farba, start feeling a little too independent for comfort. Some kept more tax money than they should have. Others raised their own armies, probably thinking, why not? And a few even flirted with the bold idea of declaring independence altogether. Not exactly a group project anymore. Succession instability was another thorny issue. While Mansa Musa had managed a smooth transition of power, the generations after him, not so lucky. The struggle for the throne didn't always erupt into full-blown wars, but oh, the courtly drama. These royal squabbles drained resources and caused deep rifts within the ruling family and the noble class. And when the palace is too busy bickering, who's left to watch the borders? And let's not forget the double-edged sword of ethnic and cultural diversity. Mali was home to many different peoples, which had its strengths, but also its headaches. Mansa Musa had used Islam quite effectively to unite various groups under one banner. But when the central power began to falter, all those beautiful differences started to look more like irreconcilable differences. Non-Islamic tribes or communities with distinct customs no longer felt so tightly bound to the capital. Some may have quietly drifted away, others not so quietly. These internal challenges didn't bring the empire crashing down overnight. But they did chip away at the sturdy base Mansa Musa had built with such care and grandeur. The result? A Mali that was no longer the united and mighty force it once was during its golden age. A Mali more vulnerable to external threats and rising rival kingdoms sniffing around for opportunity. Part 4. The Rise of New Powers and Shifting Geopolitics. While the Mali Empire was quietly unraveling from within after the golden reign of Mansa Musa, outside forces were gathering, and the regional geopolitical chessboard began to shift in ways that would eventually help bring the once great empire to its knees. One of the most formidable rivals to emerge was the Songhai Empire. Now, to be fair, Songhai started out as something of a junior partner, technically a vassal state under Mali's rule. But as Mali's grip weakened, Songhai began to stretch its legs a bit, slowly asserting its independence and ambitiously expanding its territory. Before long, they had control over key trading cities like Gao, and they weren't shy about competing with Mali for dominance over those oh-so-lucrative trans-Saharan trade routes. Songhai's rise wasn't just inconvenient for Mali, it was an existential threat. And it wasn't just Songhai causing headaches. New trade routes began to appear, pulling the economic rug out from under Mali's sand-covered feet. As European powers started poking around the coasts of West Africa, mapping out shiny new maritime trade paths, the old overland caravan routes began to lose their monopoly. Naturally, this didn't sit well with Mali, whose tax revenues and economic strength were built squarely on those traditional desert highways. External pressure didn't stop with rival empires or ambitious sailors either. The Berber nomads of the Sahara, those ever-watchful camel-mounted opportunists, grew bolder as Mali's power waned. Sensing weakness, they increased their raids on caravans and border towns, disrupting trade, draining resources, and chipping away at the fragile stability that Mali was desperately trying to hold onto. By the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the Mali Empire had lost much of the territory and influence that Mansa Musa had so magnificently stitched together. Key cities like Timbuktu and Jen fell, one after the other, into the hands of the growing Songhai Empire. Mali would linger on for a while longer, more a kingdom than an empire, but its golden age had unmistakably passed. The fall of Mali wasn't a dramatic collapse, but more of a slow unraveling, a drawn-out process shaped by weak leadership after Mansa Musa, internal divisions, and the rise of powerful new competitors. Still, this decline doesn't erase the extraordinary legacy left behind by Mansa Musa. His story, and the traces of glory he left behind, will be the heart of our final chapter. We now continue with Chapter 8, The Legacy of Mansa Musa and Its Impact Today, where we look back at what Mansa Musa left behind, and how it still echoes into our world today. Part 1. A legend that lives on in history. Although the Mali Empire eventually faded into history, the legacy of Mansa Musa lives on, not just in African history but across the entire world. He wasn't just a wealthy king. He was a figure who transformed how the world viewed Africa, proving that this continent was home to dazzling civilizations and remarkable leaders. Mansa Musa remains one of the few African rulers of the medieval era widely known in the records of both the Islamic world and even Europe. The tale of his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca, with tons of gold and an entourage that could probably be seen from space, has become an enduring legend, passed down through centuries. It's not just a story about wealth. It's a story of devotion, foresight, and truly extraordinary leadership. And perhaps a little gold dust sprinkled here and there just for flair. His appearance on the Catalan Atlas of 1375, one of Europe's most important world maps at the time, is undeniable proof of his international influence. The image of a black king, seated on a golden throne and holding a gleaming nugget of gold, burned itself into the imagination of Europe. It reshaped how they saw the so-called Dark Continent, one they had known so little about until then. Mansa Musa quite literally put Mali, and by extension West Africa, firmly on the global map. He left behind a legacy of culture and knowledge, most prominently in Timbuktu. Though the city has seen its share of ups and downs, its ancient mosques and libraries, still brimming with priceless manuscripts, stand as living testaments to the golden age he helped shape. Even now, we can trace the echoes of his intellectual generosity and artistic patronage in the architecture, the stories, and the spirit that have lasted through the ages. It's fair to say, Mansa Musa isn't just a historical figure. He's a symbol of extraordinary wealth, of wisdom, and of the kind of leadership that can change the fate of an entire continent. He reminds us that African history isn't just a story of slavery or conflict. It's also a story of mighty empires and exceptional rulers. And let's be honest, not many people leave behind a legacy so powerful, it bends maps and myths alike. Part 2. The Importance of Knowledge and Education. One of the most valuable legacies of Mansa Musa, and a lesson that has stood the test of time, is the importance he placed on knowledge and education. In a world where power was so often tied to warfare and conquest, Mansa Musa showed that investing in the mind could bring prosperity and influence that was far more lasting, and far less messy. He didn't just build schools. No, Mansa Musa transformed Timbuktu into one of the world's premier centers of learning in his time, drawing in scholars, teachers, and students from far and wide. The University of Sankore, with tens of thousands of students and hundreds of thousands of manuscripts in its libraries, wasn't just a point of pride for Mali. It was living proof of the brilliance of the educational system he established. Mansa Musa understood something quite profound. Knowledge is power. Training scholars, lawyers, and administrators wasn't merely a matter of bureaucracy, it was a way to elevate the entire civilization. He fostered an environment where learning, research, and the exchange of ideas weren't just encouraged, they were celebrated. Thanks to this, Mali didn't just become an economic powerhouse, it became a beacon of wisdom in a world often too busy swinging swords to stop and read a book. This legacy gently reminds us of the value of education, especially in today's context. It shows that to build a prosperous and thriving society, we must invest in people, in intellect. The books, the research, the knowledge passed down through generations in Timbuktu are a vibrant testament to Mansa Musa's vision, a vision that reached far beyond fleeting material wealth. He planted the seeds of knowledge, and those seeds blossomed into a brilliant garden of intellect, a legacy more magnificent than any pile of gold. Part 3. A lesson in wealth and responsibility. The story of Mansa Musa isn't just a heroic tale of unimaginable riches. No, it also carries with it some rather profound lessons about how wealth should be used, and the kind of responsibility that rests upon a leader's shoulders. Mansa Musa stands as a shining example that money, when used wisely and with purpose, can bring about real, lasting change in society. He didn't simply hoard his wealth or spend it all on palaces, silk robes, or golden goblets, tempting though that may have been. Instead, he invested much of his fortune into his nation. He built grand mosques, schools, libraries, and public works, things that weren't just pretty to look at but genuinely served the people of the empire. Mali didn't just glitter under his rule, it grew, it learned, it flourished. And then there's his pilgrimage to Mecca, which, to put it lightly, shook Egypt's economy a bit. Let's just say that throwing around too much gold like confetti at a royal wedding caused some temporary inflation. But that wasn't his goal. The pilgrimage was about elevating Mali's global prestige and fulfilling a deeply held religious duty. Mansa Musa used his gold as a tool, not just for charity or opulence, but to attract scholars, artists, and merchants to Mali. He wasn't merely a collector of wealth, he was a visionary investor. What we learn from his life is that wealth comes with strings attached, those strings being responsibility. A wealthy person doesn't just hold power, they bear the duty to use that power for good, for progress, for the benefit of others. Mansa Musa didn't let riches rot his soul. He used his fortune to build a magnificent empire, both in material terms and in spirit. He showed us that money, when used with wisdom and compassion, can be a powerful tool for good. His story reminds us all of the importance of using our assets, whatever they may be, and our influence in ways that matter. Part 4. Overcoming the stereotypes about Africa. At long last, perhaps the most important legacy of Mansa Musa lies in how he helped dismantle long-standing stereotypes about Africa. For centuries, Africa was viewed by much of the outside world, especially Europe, as the dark continent. Backward, uncivilized, and somehow lacking in sophistication. A place full of mystery, but not in a flattering way. However, the story of Mansa Musa threw a golden spanner into that dusty old narrative. Mansa Musa proved that Africa was home to brilliant civilizations, mighty empires, and exceptional leaders. Under his rule, Mali was not only swimming in gold, sometimes quite literally, but was also a thriving center of knowledge, culture, and the arts, on par with the most advanced societies in the world. He showed that Africa was not some wild, untamed land, but a continent rich in history and astonishing achievements. His appearance on European maps, the writings of Arab scholars, and the stories of his jaw-dropping wealth forced the world to take a second look at West Africa. And this time they didn't look away. They stared, with awe and maybe a little envy. Mansa Musa became a symbol of African power and prosperity, strutting onto the global stage with all the quiet confidence of a man who knows exactly how much gold he's sitting on. Even today, in our so-called modern world, the story of Mansa Musa still holds the power to inspire, and to challenge the lingering misconceptions about Africa. It reminds us that the continent's history is rich and complex, filled with moments of great splendor and triumph. Mansa Musa is a loud and clear reminder that Africa was, is, and always will be an essential part of human history, bringing its own remarkable contributions to the table. He wasn't just a king, He was a magnificent ambassador of Africa, one who forever changed the way the world saw the continent. And so, we have journeyed together through the full story of Mansa Musa's life and legacy, from his early years, all the way to the height of his power and the lasting marks he left behind. He wasn't just the richest man in recorded history. He was a visionary ruler, a generous patron of knowledge, and a living symbol of African power and magnificence. Hopefully this boring tale didn't lull you into a nap, but rather opened up a refreshing new window into a colorful chapter of history, and into the life of one truly extraordinary man. Mansa Musa reminds us that greatness isn't measured solely by how much wealth we possess, but by how we use that wealth, to build, to uplift, and to leave behind a legacy that matters for generations to come. If you found this story intriguing and feel inspired to dig deeper into the hidden corners of history, don't hesitate to leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video, or share this one with a fellow history lover. Let's keep traveling together through the timeless flow of history, uncovering the great stories still waiting quietly in the past.